single hair stuck in my shirt there. Orthodox Christian living in my log cabin on the bank of the Anchor River. If you want to support my small channel, it's www.paypal.me/Pike A. I've got a treat for us tonight. I just got this. Just came in the mail. Hot off the press. Death to the World, Volume 31. Really excited to finally have this in my hands. I think it was originally going to come out like mid-October. And then it didn't come out until the end of December. But they do good work. They do awesome work. I'm just so glad to have it. So I'm going to do some reading from this. And I'm also going to do some reading from the Saint of the Prisons. We'll continue on with some more of that. So Death to the World, Volume 31. Just came in the mail. Actually, I had to drive to Anchor Point and get it to the post office because they couldn't access my mailbox a couple days ago when it was supposed to get here because of all the ice. So let's see. First article that I'm going to read for us is entitled Atomic Hell. Stand at the brink of despair, and when you see that you cannot bear it anymore, draw back a little and have a cup of tea. Saint Sophrony of Essex. These words uttered by the saint were in response to an inquiry from a fellow monk. Father Sophrony, tell me, how can someone be saved? His answer, he admits, came from his inner world, a world full of despair about the physical world he was living in. With the drop of the atomic bomb and the mass chaos incited upon humanity during World War II, the saint was witnessing a world in deep travail and bereft of the belief in resurrection. He had left everything behind to become a monk, and the deep abyss the world was experiencing tortured his soul. He opened up his inner world to his fellow monk and answered. He says, because this desperation had just subsided within me, and my prayer was losing its intensity. As soon as I calmed, I did not experience this calmness as a happy life, but as death. When the pain of despair began to wane within him, a calm would not come, but a loss of the taste of God's presence, as he describes as the loss of the sense of the existence of the eternal being. He was trapped in this paradox, so he uttered these words, stand at the brink of despair, not knowing the depth of these words, but uttering them from the state of his inner world. St. Silouan would interpret them to St. Sophrony in a phrase that would become the hallmark of both their teachings. Keep your mind in hell and despair not. Today we live in a hell. The dropping of the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima occurred on the feast of the Lord's Transfiguration on Mount Tabor, becoming the icon of humanity and modernity, detransfiguration, atomic light, death, black radiation, the traces of dignified humanity known in the previous eras is only recognizable in form, and the contents of the highest part of the human being, the soul, has been deconstructed, monetized, obliterated, taken over by robots. We've been immersed into a hell where there is no God, no family, and no country, left to wander searching for who we are and what our purpose is. The poisonous Crowleyan message, do what thou wilt, it is the whole of the law, has pushed humanity deeper into the abyss of a warped sense of self-expressionism, bound up with a preference as our only identity. The world has taught us that we are biological nomads. The soul does not exist, and living to satisfy our own will by any means necessary is the definition of a fulfilled life. Craving, base desire has become the likeness of humanity. Man, divorcing himself from God, has come to fulfill the Nietzschean nightmare of the death of God and the building of a new man without him. This has led to a constant search and the modern devotion for man to liberate himself. Transcendent order and principles have been abandoned and replaced with a chaotic experiment for a promised new freedom, detransfiguration, wandering the dark abyss to find fleeting happiness, lacking a metaphysical order even pagans of old admired and venerated. In order to break away from the old order that shackles us, as the great lie goes, we have become an age great in technology, yet so poor in spirit. While rockets pierce the firmament, so also suicide soars to numbers unknown in our history. Eradicate the Christian consciousness, build the machine. The Enlightenment philosophers posited that there is no God and the self is supreme. However, to Nietzsche, they failed to recognize their triumph in killing God and thus did not come to the ultimate ending. God's too decomposed, God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. There has never been a greater deed, and whoever is born after us, for the sake of this deed, he will belong to a higher history than all history hitherto. In putting God to death, the stage was set to enable self-creation to usher in a new age, as the corrupting philosophers of the 19th and 20th centuries posited. What has been this new age? We have witnessed the champions of this ideology disintegrate into madness and scream in defiance of their rotting state, pretending that their way of life leads to fulfillment, peace, and the road to a new humanity. Nietzsche's madness defies him. The blood spilt in the name of Marx refuses him. Victims of abuse in the name of Freud and Kinsey decry them. And the words of Father Seraphim Rose, a 20th century monk, ring more true. Christ is the only exit from this world. All other exits, sexual rapture, political utopia, economic independence, are but blind alleys in which rot the corpses of the many who have tried them. Yes, Christ, this is the only way out. The God the philosophers who have shaped modernity attempted to slaughter in a personal vendetta stands in complete contrast to the new man that the modern experiment has produced. It is man as the source of death, chaos, division, paranoia, anxiety, delusion. In the last 100 years, mankind has accumulated more mass graves than history can compare. Transfiguration and atomic death, heaven and modern hell. The two could not be more opposed. Christ offers man deification and endowed dignity, sainthood. The new man of Christianity is the perfected man, a man above the earth but on the earth. Man cannot self-create history, and its figures show that this leads to depravity, insanity, and destruction. Man turns against God, then against others, and finally against himself. What is man that God is mindful of him? What is this creature we have been taught is just an animal? Man was created in the image of God, an image that can never be obliterated but only obscured. He's always understood in relation to this image, but never apart from it. Man is either turned towards God or against him. There is no such thing as self-creation. It is an impossibility, for man is always relational. The concept of individual self today is a modern concept, not seen anywhere else in history. While image always exists, likeness of God can be obliterated, altered, destroyed. This likeness, however, is the definition of true humanity, a call to divinization. For a man is not simply one who has man's hands and feet, nor one who is merely rational, but one who practices devotion and virtue with confidence, writes St. John Chrysostom. Hierotheos Vlachos points out that the term person has to be used with great care, because we cannot simply add it to all those who are living, but chiefly to those who partake of purifying, illuminating, and deifying energy of God. Man is born with potentiality to be a person, and he partakes of the living grace of God. Thus, the human being, the person, is not defined by appetite, preference, and self-expressionism, but by sanctification. This is true humanity, transfiguration, inverting the inversion that wiped out humanity in atomic destruction. Some people, by the word freedom, understand the ability to do whatever one wants. People have more allowed themselves to come into slavery to sins passions, and defilements, more often than others appear as zealots of external freedom, wanting to broaden the laws as much as possible. But such a man uses external freedom only to more severely burden himself with inner slavery. True freedom is the active ability of a man who is not enslaved to sin, who is not pricked by condemning conscience, to choose better in the light of God's truth and to bring into actuality with the help of gracious power of God. This is the freedom of which neither heaven nor earth are restricted, writes St. Philaret of Moscow. Washing off the radiation and biological birth, we are formless and undefined, but in baptism we are fashioned and formed, and our formless and undefined life receives form and definition, writes St. Nicholas Kavasilas. Spiritual rebirth is necessary, not just moral revitalization. Morality without grace is worthless, as we have seen in the white picket-fenced American Christianity of the 80s and 90s. True rebellion against a rotting world is a spiritual one, not a conservative or progressive one. The ascetics of old laid out 3 stages that man must climb to reach the peak of Tabor: purification, illumination, and deification. Purification is asceticism, the working of morality through the cutting off of the corrupted will, fasting, prostrations, vigils. Through asceticism, the heart is purified by the cooperation of the human effort and the grace of God through repentance. The illumination of the heart, this is when the purified hearts become illumined by God, experiences unceasing prayer, and in the words of St. Basil, becomes a temple of God. When the illumination of the heart begins and becomes an integrated and stable state, selfishness, egoism, and self-centeredness are gradually replaced by love which does not seek its own, writes Father John Romanides. Glorification is the peak of Tabor, where the saints have reached, standing face to face with the living God. According to the fathers of the church, glorification is perfect freedom, and purification and illumination are the beginning of freedom, continues Romanides. It is freedom because man reaches his full potential as a person, free from the passions and illusory things that are in reality bondage to death and mortality, opposite and outside of our nature. While our dying society teaches us that free living is the way to our potential and the confines of tradition is a prison, we have witnessed the opposite to be true. Following after and living for the sake of pleasure becomes slavery. Inner slavery, the doom scroll, the weed, the bottle, the money, the machine. The new man's hell has become reality, and that reality has pushed us to embrace the living God, to hold on to the brink of despair. Steeped in the traditions that once sanctified humanity, we step back, sip, and engage once again with a rebellion against the world around us. We are in hell, but we despair not. The editors. This was From Death to the World, Volume 31. This just came out. Just got it today. If you want to buy Death to the World magazine, it's just deathtotheworld.com. You can get digital versions too if you want to just pay $5. You can upload the digital version to your computer. Sorry, it's been so dry out. I battled putting new brakes on my truck this morning. I never buy a used BMW. It was just absolutely unbelievable. What a struggle. But I was able to accomplish it. One of the brake pads just totally separated. They were getting to the point of needing replacement. So I did brake pads and rotors. What a nightmare. So I'm going to read some more for us from The Saint of the Prisons by Monk Moise, Moise. This is a beautiful book. Before prison, Valeriu Gafencu was born on January 24th, 1921, in Bessarabia in the town of Sanguera, near the city of Balti. His parents, Vasily and Elena, were wealthy peasants. After completing high school, his father took classes at the Technical School for Electricians, and after World War I, enrolled in the College of Electrotechnology in Lassi. He did not follow the coursework through to graduation, but returned to his native village to teach. During World War I, he was mobilized into the Russian Navy. On March 27, 1918, the National Council voted to unite Bessarabia with Romania. Vasily was a member of the council. In his notes from the colony at Galda, Valeriu says a few words about his parents. When she was married, Mama was about 24 years old. Tuta was about 10 years older than she was and had loved her in secret for a long time. Mama was a simple girl with an elementary school education without any wealth other than her spiritual and physical purity. Tuta was an honest man, healthy and robust, with a good upbringing. He was a student at the Polytechnic University, well regarded by all men of value in Bessarabia. With a little more schooling, he would have become an engineer. But after coming into contact with high society and realizing its decadence, he renounced all prospects open for him and went back to the village to farm and teach. He wanted to establish a pure, beautiful home, to have a wife, children, a farm, and he married Mama. Mama once asked him, "Why are you taking me as your wife since I have no education, no money?" "Well, why don't you choose an educated girl from Lassi, since so many girls wanted you for a husband?" He answered her, "Lena, so many times I look at you and I think that I am not worthy of you. You have something special, you have purity, and that's why I love you." Before marriage, Tuta had sinned with other women. He had, however, a sense of spiritual honor. He was totally sincere in recognizing his own sinfulness, and that's why he was so dear to me. In my last year of school, I was troubled by thoughts and anxieties regarding relations with women. I asked him one night, "Tuta, I'm a bit embarrassed, but please tell me honestly, what's the best way to deal with women? Among my friends, I advocate abstinence, but I meet with great opposition. The environment in the schools is very bad," Tuta answered me. "The best thing is to abstain. I sinned in my youth because of a misunderstanding. I had reached the age of 21 and was still a virgin, still pure. But it was rumored among the boys and girls my age that I was impotent, and that was why I didn't have relations with women. I was angry and I tried to find out who had invented this rumor. I discovered that it had started with a girl who was intrigued by my honorable and pure behavior. I sinned with her out of spite. Later on, I was sorry. Oh, how much my father's confession helped me. His advice protected me from so many temptations and falls. After you were arrested, Valeriu, my mother recounted, I was home alone. One night during the winter of 1944, I left Balti on foot for Sangeri. The frost was terrible. A man driving a sled caught up with me. I prayed him to take me into his sled as he did. He was from a village farther away. We arrived in Sangeri late at night. Since it was winter, I put him up in our house. After I fed him, I thought, now I must prepare the bed so that he could sleep. And my good mother thought it would be best to prepare the bedroom for him while she would sleep on the cot in the kitchen. And that's what she did. During the night, Mama heard the doors of the house opening one after another. Alarmed, she woke up at once. The man opened the door of the kitchen slowly, and Mama asked him with her gentle voice, "What do you want, mister? I thought you might be cold and would like to warm up," he answered. Mama looked at him and replied, "I have taken you in and sheltered you in my house, offering you the most honorable place with my thoughts towards God. And just as I have one God, Jesus Christ, I also have only one husband." The man cast his eyes to the ground in shame, and closing the door behind him, went back to his bed. I kissed Mama, and she told me that throughout their married life, both she and Tuta were faithful to each other. What a wonderful thing in which God is well pleased. They lived all their lives so beautifully. They loved each other, and we, their children, never saw them arguing. I know that Tuta loved Mama. He protected her. For example, he would get up early in the morning, prepare everything for the field, and prepare the household for the day. Then at sunrise, when he left for the fields, he would wake her up. He always let her sleep in so that she could rest. I still hear him saying to her affectionately, "Hey, Lena Leslie Bones, get up." The fruit of the love of these exceptional people were their four children: Valeriu, Valentina, Eleonora and Elisabetta. Valeriu started school at Sangeri, then went on to Ion Crenega High School in the nearby town of Balti. While a student, Valeriu distinguished himself. He received high marks in his class. He was loved by his fellow students. He was highly appreciated by his teachers. He was demanding with himself and also with the education of his sisters. As an older brother, he supervised them closely regarding their friendships, lessons, and such. Being a sensitive person, he loved literature and wrote several pieces that were published in the school's periodical. He graduated from high school in the summer of 1940 and enrolled in law school in Lassi. During this period, Bessarabia was handed over to the Soviet troops. The Gafencu family crossed the river Prut and took refuge in Lassi. Valeriu, together with his father, went back to Bessarabia in order to resolve matters having to do with their abandoned homestead. When they crossed the river Prut back to Romania, they had to keep clear of Soviet troops guarding the border from the riverbank. A touching scene recounted by Virgil Maxim occurred there. After a short rest on the right bank of the river, the old man stood up and gave thanks to God for his help in bringing his family to safety. He then embraced his son and made the final confession of his life. I brought you here so that you can take care of your mother and sisters. I charge you with this responsibility before God. I have to return to my people, my village. Valeriu was troubled. The old man noticed his emotion and continued, "What would all of your Bessarabian brothers say? How could I raise my eyes to heaven if I and others like me, who until now have struggled to preserve the Romanian spirit in this land, would now flee from the path of the oppressors and not take part in the suffering that awaits us?" Valeriu understood his father and didn't try to dissuade him. He realized how strong his father's sense of duty was and resolved to be faithful himself as a son worthy of the same faith in God and in the same future of his people. Better times will come, but now we need sacrifices, added the old man. Once again embracing his son and making the sign of the cross, he headed for the shore and swam across the river into his beloved Bessarabia. A short time later, he was arrested and sent with a group of fellow Bessarabians to a camp beyond the Arctic Circle. He died a year later amid horrible conditions, placing his hope in God, to whom he had entrusted his loved ones. Someone who had miraculously escaped from the camp later revealed these things to Valeriu. As a student at the law school in Iasi, Valeriu came to the attention of his professors as an honest young man full of decency. Fellow peers also appreciated Valeriu for setting an example of benevolence and upstanding behavior. In the fall of 1941, the reigning political regime declared the Legionnaire movement illegal. Valeriu, a member of the Legionnaires, was arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison. He was 20 years old. Before discussing what happened with Valeriu during his imprisonment, one must clarify an aspect that remains difficult for many. His involvement with the legionary movement. It must be said from the onset that, before all else, the legionary phenomenon was a wave of feeling or sentiment, a state of spirit. It has been observed that Romanians are generally not receptive to doctrines, but to spiritual states. This is certainly true with respect to the legionnaire movement. According to those who experienced it, it was rather a spontaneous phenomenon, a state of spiritual resonance, a response to internal searching, than a collective adherence to a doctrine. The legionnaires were convincing to others through their manner of living, through their example, through what they transmitted. They had a faith and a decisiveness that others found stimulating. But where did this manner of living come from? What gave rise to the spiritual state that contaminated thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people? What exactly kept up their zeal? Historical, sociological, or political explanations have been offered. Speaking of a localized echo of European unrest and upheaval, partially referring to long-standing repression of the Romanian people who were growing dissatisfied with corruption in politics. without disputing the fact that these did play a role in the sense that the legionnaires had their origins in the problems of the day. The response they had vis-a-vis these concerns was rooted in their faith in God. Although they've departed from historical causes, if we consider things from a spiritual perspective, their orientation toward God and toward Christian values, although admittedly not always affirmed or defended by the most evangelical methods, as well as their yearning for renewal and purification, could not have been merely a social phenomenon. I believe that it was also a spiritual phenomenon, a spiritual calling addressed to this nation to return to God, a deepening of certain meanings and incentive toward Christian renewal, and especially the call of this generation of Romanians to martyrdom. It is true that not everyone, and especially not from the beginning, was aware of the spiritual finality of this calling. Many were left behind on the way at different stages according to the measure of their capacity for spiritual understanding and growth. But a good number of them were enlightened. They were purified, and through suffering like Gafensu, penetrated deeper into the sense of this calling and proceeded toward martyrdom. The road was not easy. There were slips and falls, but also enlightenment and moments of spiritual uplift, demonstrating a virtue dear to Paisios the Athonite, self-sacrifice with soulful boldness. Legionnarism was, from a spiritual point of view, and in spite of all human shortcomings, a preparation for martyrdom. This was clearly reflected in the legionnaires' behavior in communist prisons, where they showed the true measure of their worth. Of the hundreds of thousands of political prisoners, a significant number came from among their ranks. In any case, the finest and largest number of Orthodox prisoners were legionnaires. For all of these men, training in the legionnaire movement was a preparation for the difficult trials to which they would later be subjected. After wandering off in different directions, Codrenu and other young people, troubled by the need to do something for their country, realized what was needed to instigate a profound change in society was not so much a new party or new political program, as they themselves had been tempted to believe, but rather an education of Christian and national character that would lead to moral renewal. This country is perishing from a lack of people, not from a lack of programs. This is our opinion. It is not programs that we must create, but people, new people. Therefore, the cornerstone from which the Legion sets out its humankind, not political programs, the reform of people, not the reform of political programs. Therefore, the Legion of the Archangel Michael will be a school and an army rather than a political party. The Romanian people at this point in history do not need a great politician, as some mistakenly believe, but a great educator and leader to vanquish the powers of evil and shatters the ranks of evildoers. In order to do this, however, he must first overcome evil in himself and in his brethren. In order to form a legionary elite, the best from among the youth were selected, beginning with those of high school age. This organization of young men was named Fratia de Cruza, the Brotherhood of the Cross. Those targeted were screened according to certain criteria: faithfulness in church attendance, good academic achievement, respectfulness toward others, love of country, honesty, etc. Candidates were not admitted to the FDC automatically, but in accordance with certain requirements. It set out to be an elite organization that would accept only the best. Those who were accepted found an atmosphere of love, seriousness, and enthusiasm, an atmosphere highly suitable for their spiritual growth. They received a primary moral and spiritual education. Along Christian ideas, they were encouraged to participate in the sacrament of confession, to adhere to a prayer schedule, to fast, to avoid bodily sins, to be merciful, correct, punctual, sympathetic, ready to help others, obedient, and studious. Since work played an important role in legionnaire training, work camps were organized in which, along with legionnaires, Brothers of the Cross participated in the construction and repair of churches, schools, roads, bridges, levees, etc. They worked in an atmosphere of youthful enthusiasm, while the camps also provided an opportunity for the formation and strengthening of spiritual ties. Their meetings began with a prayer commemorating those who had died for the Legionnaire cause, followed by a reading from the New Testament. At every meeting, those present took turns introducing a theme having to do with faith, morality, national history, culture, etc. Legionnaire songs were sung and memorized. Participants took turns reciting from Legionnaire writings, while the final portions of the meetings were reserved for decision making regarding new goodwill projects that needed to be undertaken, such as help for someone in need, collection of assistance for the family of an arrested Legionnaire, or similar work for the benefit of their brethren. The young men who gathered together in the FDC made up a real family. They were taught to love one another and to help one another in time of need. The friendship that existed between them sprang from an impressive degree of love and sincerity. The most original part of the meetings was the moment of friendship or sincerity, a form of public confession of all mistakes made since the last meeting. This did not replace the sacrament of confession. Each of them also confessed to his spiritual father. Rather, it was an expression of the trust and sincerity that united them. After they all confessed their mistakes, each of them reported what mistakes they had noticed among the others who were present. Then each of them received a penance. These moments of sincerity were very important for strengthening their spiritual bonds within the safety of love and understanding given by the other brothers of the cross. Each of them found the power to struggle against their own mistakes and defects. All the natural, noble aspirations of a young soul, friendship, sincerity, love, sacrifice for lofty causes, found fulfillment in the warm atmosphere of the FDC. So I need to get something to drink. Forgive me, brothers. I'm struggling with my voice. It's been so cold and dry out. It's like a desert. So I'm going to make myself some coffee, and then I'll be back in a little bit. I love you all. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for all the beautiful hearts and smiles, and Orthodox crosses, and doves, angels. God bless you all. I had a new opportunity present itself to me today. So it looks like I'll be able to do something different for work. And I'm feeling so blessed. I'm so thankful to God for getting me out of that terrible situation. But I'm still going to do as much as I can to try to make it better for the next people that have to work down there. I love you all, brothers and sisters, and I'll see you in a little bit here. Be blessed.